Welcome to another episode of Come Together. Dr. Amna Kirmani from University of Maryland. Go Terps. How are you? Great to have you on the
Good.
show.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, go.
Yes, I'm so excited to be talking to you today. You have such a cool job. You are the chair of marketing, and after after all your many years of research, I've looked into some of the work that you've done and some of the topics that you've researched, and I have to say, as a salesman that loves psychology, marketing is kind of the intersection of those worlds, isn't it?
Absolutely. Marketing is all about consumer behavior. What motivates us, what gets us to buy products, what gets us to buy more products,
Yep.
all of those.
Yeah, can you, so for anyone that wouldn't know, I guess, to begin with, including myself, what's the difference between marketing and advertising?
A good question. A lot of times people think that marketing and advertising are the same, and they're not. Advertising is one subsection of marketing. Marketing is advertising, it's also sales promotion, pricing. We want to make sure that the price is right for you to buy a particular product. It's also product design, what features it has, what colors the packaging reveals, what kinds of inferences consumers make from all of that. And
Hmm.
of course, where is it sold? If it's sold in CVS, you have a different impression of the brand than if it's sold in Neiman Marcus.
Sure.
All of those are part of marketing.
And so advertising would more narrowly be, how would you define that subset within marketing?
Well, marketing, we talk about the four P's: price, promotion, product, and place. Place is where it's sold, like the retailers, the channels of distribution.
Hmm.
And price is obviously what price you set for the product. The product is its design, its features, the core product, and everything surrounding it. And then promotion is where advertising comes in. And it can be advertising on social media, on television in the Super Bowl. It can be billboards, it can be radio advertising. So many different forms of advertising
Hmm.
exist. But that's what most people think of marketing. They either think of sales or they think of advertising.
And it seems to be much more, I guess, much more cumulative than that. It embodies many more aspects of the business world and the human psychology than that.
Exactly, because a marketing manager will look at all those different aspects, not just advertising.
Yeah, it's really, that makes me think. It's funny that you say that because I'm very engrossed in the entertainment world. I love the entertainment world, especially the business aspect of it. And so, when I read stories about how Disney, for example, would let out a new Star Wars movie, and then they had a marketing budget of, an additional, I'd say the budget for the movie was 300 million, and then they spent another $100 million in marketing. I assume that's just billboards and stuff like that. But you're telling me that the marketing campaign goes much deeper than the way we would normally associate it.
I think when Disney says that they're spending that much money on marketing, it's advertising, billboards, television. It's also doing promos with their actors,
Right.
having them go around and give press releases and so forth. It's merchandising.
Hmm.
All the Star Wars merchandise, all of
Sure.
that is part of their marketing. And they might even do personal outreach, like sending emails, or in the olden days, it was catalogs and so forth, to particular consumers that they thought would be very responsive. So that could be also part of it.
It's very funny that you say that. I work a sales job. I work with my father. We sell medical equipment, and I didn't begin in sales. I was a little timid at first, and it took me some time to adjust to speaking to people on the phone. And I forgot what gave. I was reading a book about Michael Ovitz and the CAA, and about how Michael Ovitz had kind of dipped his toe into the advertising and marketing world a little bit with Coca-Cola, which I would like to get back to maybe if you're familiar with that a little bit after. But it gave me the idea. I had a customer that I knew was calling me from a hospital or from imaging center, and they were looking for an ultrasound machine. I knew that they were looking around, shopping around. They weren't sure, which way to go. And so I call my dad, who I work with, and I say, can I expend some budget for some marketing and send this customer some flowers for the weekend or something like that? And he said, absolutely. And I guess based on what you were just saying, it kind of feels like that would fit the definition of a certain aspect of marketing for sure, right?
Absolutely, but what you really want to do is figure out, what does this customer really want?
Hmm.
What are they looking for? And and it's not just they're looking for features. What are the benefits they're looking for? What is it that you can do for them that they couldn't do on their own? And that's where the psychology comes in. That's where, if the customer is king, know your customer, all those common phrases really refer to the fact that you have to understand your customer in order to be able to sell them products. You
Sure.
have to know what they want.
Yes. I want to get you. It's so funny because every sentence that you say, especially in today's world, could be expounded on in so many different ways. But I want to stick maybe for a little bit on the topic of psychology of marketing, psychology in marketing. And I've read, or I've attempted to push through a big chunks at a time of Danny Kahaman's Thinking Fast and Slow, which is a very
Mhm.
famous book on how people make decisions and decision
Right.
making. And he won the Nobel Prize, I believe, in economics for
Mm.
his book, even though it was based on decision making, not necessarily economics. And he talks about presentation of language, and he talks about there's certain phraseologies and ways to speak to people and communicate with people, and even to he said, and he gave examples of, for example, casinos covering up the potential for losses by emphasizing the potential of wins, and a lot of other tricks, I guess, that would catch our attention or catch our reward system, that we're looking for some kind of we're motivated to try. Hey everyone, real quick, if you're enjoying the show, click subscribe and rate the show 5 stars. Helps a ton. Thanks so much. To get something.
Right.
Can maybe you could expound on that a little bit, perhaps?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different aspects of what you've talked about, but let me give you an example of Starbucks.
Sure.
I'm a Starbucks rewards customer, and you will notice that if you are go to Starbucks regularly and then you don't go for a week or so, maybe you're out of the country, they send you some kind of incentive. They say you can get bonus stars if you do such and such. That's Starbucks reaching out to me to try and get me to buy again. That's marketing.
Hmm.
And it's a nudge. And, behavioral economists like Danny Kahneman talk about nudges. And nudges are simply either phraseology, or they can be little incentives, reminders for you to take some action.
Hmm.
And these days, marketers know all about what your habits are. So, for instance, because they've incentivized me by saying you can get stars for your purchases, they're not giving me those stars for free. They are giving me those stars because they're gathering a lot of data about me. And they're finding out what I buy, when I buy, how often I buy. And all of that they put into their algorithm, which then tells them, well, she will buy such and such, on these days of the week. And if I don't, then they'll come back and they'll try and get me to buy more. And social media does exactly the same, though they do it in a different context. They do it, clicking is their big thing. You click on something, and they will try and make that something as interesting as possible for me to click on it,
Hmm.
even if it means might not be true even. But
Sure.
this is what we call clickbait.
Right.
It's like the headline sounds really cool, and so we do that. But what they're trying to do is keep me engaged. Both Starbucks and let's say Facebook are trying to keep me engaged. Why? Because in the case of Starbucks, they sell more coffee.
Hmm.
In the case of social media, they sell eyeballs for ads, because
Yes.
that's how they make money.
Yes.
So they are incentivized to continue to make me click on whatever it is they're sending me.
So would you say that if you're the company like Starbucks, hypothetically, that that my data as the customer is more valuable than than me actually buying the coffee, than me buying the sales? What's the priority if I'm Starbucks? Am I trying to collect data
Starbucks,
over
your
sale?
data is very important because it helps them sell you
Mm-hmm.
their products. Now, I don't know whether Starbucks sells their data to other companies, but that's where, I mean, social media companies do that all the time.
Sure.
They sell their data, they use their data to design, to figure out where to advertise for some products. Because in order, they get rewarded by the number of times I click on an ad. So
Mm-hmm.
then that the advertiser pays for those clicks. So they know exactly what motivates me to click on an ad. And so they'll send me that ad.
Sure. And then you have the people that are in
Or a
between.
bad thing. So there's been research done that even though a company may say, I'm looking for construction workers and I would like to be equally accessible to men and women, what Facebook will say, well, that's its algorithm will say, no, men click more on those ads. And so they'll send those ads to men more so than women. And that's how they create some of the biases in online advertising.
Yeah. It's incredible to think about the amount of power that search engines in general have
Hmm.
because they control the information and the availability of information that people can receive.
They do. And now AI has taken over the role of search engines. So what you see when you go on Google, before you just did a Google search and you got a list of potential items that you could click on. And by the way, that list is prioritized by people or the organizations who pay the most. So it's
Hmm.
an advertisement itself.
Hmm.
And now Google's AI engine, which is Gemini, will summarize all that for you. And so you don't even have to read the list. You can read the summary of what Gemini has put together. And that's where the power is, the power of distributing information.
Yeah. And I can imagine, I would like to maybe hear a little bit about how the industry has evolved throughout the course of your career, because it's evolved quite a bit, and way more in the last, I would imagine, decade or 15 years than for a long time before that. But I even know for myself, again, with a small business, my first responsibility rather within the company was to build a website that had good, what my dad called SEO, search engine optimization. And what he
Mhm.
said was, you're going to need a lot of original content that Google could see that you're posting consistently and that you're an active user. You're going to need a lot of backlinks that people can say that they're referring to you to show that you're an authentic source that people are referring to.
Mhm.
And he says, and you have to make sure that nothing that you have is more has a better title than the content that's within it, because Google tracks how long people stay on the website. And if they click
Mhm.
on and click right off, they take a note of that and say, hey, this doesn't look like this is a particularly authentic website. And so I had to learn a lot of that. And then I realized, I spent probably a year and a half working on this. And then I realized that the first 4 or 5 results on any kind of search are paid ads anyway. And even if I was number one on the SEO, how many people are clicking past 5 different web links and companies in order to even get to that number one position on the organic search? So I had changed the business plan and said, we'll build up the SEO as time goes on, but it's much more important to find the niche key advertising words than to dedicate all this attention on being fourth or fifth place in the Google searches.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The digital era has changed how we approach advertising. It's, yes, it's about those keywords that you're talking about. So, for instance, a keyword could be kidney.
Hmm.
If you are a kidney transplant company, you want to buy that keyword or you want to bid for that keyword. And if you are the highest bidder, then your company is the first thing that people see when they type in kidney or kidney transplant or something like that. And so a lot of search engine optimization now is about keyword optimization and paying for those keywords.
Hmm.
figuring out what those major keywords are and then paying bidding for those, and it's a constant automatic bidding system that that goes on, and it's pretty much live.
Yeah, it is. It's crazy, and I could actually see real. You know, I set a daily budget, and we see real time numbers as to where the costs are going and which keywords are getting what kind of traction. And the truth is that you really need. I mean, because data is so valuable, you need to really spend a lot of money on advertising to even be able to understand some kind of consumer pattern and some kind of customer pattern.
Right.
So you're almost at a disadvantage if you are at a mom and pop place where you have a limited budget because it's hard to accumulate enough customer information to be able to make really intelligent decisions. Whereas Walmart or Target has no shortage of advertising for light bulbs and ceiling fans and lamps and sports drinks and stuff like that.
Right. So if you are a small business owner, then you have to fight in other dimensions. And
Hmm.
one of those is word of mouth.
Okay.
So word of mouth is what a lot of medical professionals use, because if you're happy with your doctor, then you'll recommend that doctor to other people. But now in the digital era, it's all about reviews, user
Yeah.
generated reviews. And these days, anytime you go to a professional or a company, they ask you to leave a review
Hmm.
because that's their currency now. That's how, instead of asking friends and family, people just go online and look at the reviews.
Hmm.
And so that's how things have changed as well in the digital era.
Sure. And let's talk about a little bit before the digital era, some things, some tactics perhaps that may have survived and some that have fallen away and become extinct. You know, I just started the famous TV show Mad Men recently
Mhm.
because I just watched My Friends and Neighbors with John Hamm, and I was like, my wife and I both loved it. So we said, we'll start this. And he had a very interesting line about how marketing and marketers really establish and create the narrative as to what consumers even want. And I don't know whether that was, that was Hollywood glamorization of the industry or whether that's really their philosophy. Do the marketers tend to chase consumer patterns or look to create them?
They do both.
Okay.
It's easier now to chase them because of all the data, but think about fads.
Hmm.
Fads are, preferences that take off for no known reason about why is it that everybody wants a pet rock right now or a Cabbage Patch doll or whatever it is, the current one. But that just happens internally. It happens, it's grassroots. Those are ones we cannot predict. But there are lots of others where you have a good idea and you know that this will really catch on. And that's where consumer psychology comes in.
Hmm.
And that's where you can create a need for something. And it could be then the tactics you use. One is scarcity, which is, oh, we only have two of these left. So you go online and you are buying something and it says two left, and you're afraid that it's going to go.
Hmm.
So you say, "Oh, I better get it before it goes because it must be really popular." And by the way, never believe that at a dealer, car dealer, because
Or a
if
medical equipment dealer.
if they say we only have one left,
Right.
they can go and order five more of those, from other dealers in the state and so forth. But that's a very common tactic used in selling cars.
Hmm.
So scarcity is a big one.
Right. Right.
Novelty is another one. Novelty is new, improved Tide detergent. It's like, you have no idea how it's new or improved, but you say, oh, it's new means news. And
Hmm.
so you tend to go for that.
Right.
Yeah.
It's funny that you say that about the cars, because again, I sell the medical equipment I sell is actually refurbished generally or
Mhm.
secondhand, and it's a very niche market because, for example, if you're a cardiologist and you don't work with a hospital and so you have a limited budget, you can't afford to spend $120,000 on an ultrasound machine for that's brand new. You might be able to afford them for $20,000 that might be 10 years old, but it's 20,000. You save yourself $80,000, and so a lot of the conflict that I find is that a lot of times, again, there's a handful of dealers in the country, and we generally have an idea as to what the demand for particular models are like at any given time. And so there'll be times where a customer will call me and I'll be confident that no one else has it because I know that I've either gotten emails from other dealers saying, hey, we're looking for this too, or I've noticed that a bunch of people are looking for this all around the same time. And so I might stand my ground with pricing a little bit and say, hey, if you want it, this is the price, let me know. And I could count on the fact they'll come back. And there are a lot of times where I know there's a surplus of the products in the market. And I'll say, we're actually running a special that if you give me a good review online, I'll give you $1,500 off or something like that. And and there's a lot more wiggle room. So I can totally see that. And as far as application of novelty, I think that everyone feels like they want it, and the question is whether they're going to have company brand novelty or product novelty,
Mhm.
right? As in, here's why my product is special, or here's what my company has to offer you that other companies can't.
Right. And if you can convince people that you're offering something unique, they're much more likely to buy it.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm sorry we got sidetracked a little bit from the original question, but so speaking of used car salesmen, what are some older school marketing techniques that have persisted or not?
Another one that car salesmen use is, well, I don't know if I can really reduce the price. Let me go talk to my manager. And they go off, they have coffee, they come back. They're not talking to their manager. And then they'll come back and say, well, my manager says blah, blah, blah. And they'll give you a little bit. So that's just a standard tactic that they use. And what can consumer, so one thing I study is what is consumers' knowledge about these tactics?
Mm,
How can we educate consumers that these tactics exist and you can sort of respond to them?
sure.
And nowadays I see online stories about 5 ways you can do such and such. And sometimes it tells you 5 ways you can tell a review is fake.
Ooh,
And it's got too many exclamation marks in it. It's very generic. It's not concrete enough, so forth. So that is improving people's persuasion knowledge about how marketers are trying to get them to do something.
mm-hmm.
And it may be wrong. You may have inaccurate knowledge, persuasion knowledge, but whenever I can, I do tell people about some of these tactics that are being used against them.
Right.
Or it's not against them, but it's trying to get you to buy something you may or may not want. And
Definitely.
in the spur of the moment that people will buy it.
Yeah, certainly. And again, it's funny because even though technology has changed so dramatically, there are some methods and it's funny because the marketing world is almost split into different umbrellas. We have in person. I have a friend one of my best friends, his dad does commercial printing. And
Mhm.
so he prints big billboards for Madison Square Garden or for Jeep, and he does their big in-person printing, and he won't let he in growing up, and especially in college, my friend's an accountant. His dad did not let him join the company business because he said that print marketing is going to go in the tubes. I have a hard time believing that because it almost seems that no matter how advanced technology is, people are still driving down the highway. There's always billboards and on these park benches and by these bus stops. So there's certain marketing methods that seem to persist despite technology advancing. And it kind of feels like is this true that they become siloed into their own little industry? So there'd be physical marketing, and then there would be television marketing, and even within television, you have movie theaters, you have television for streaming, you have corporate, whatever you'd call more mainstream television, and then you'd have the actual what podcast advertising or social media advertising, and all of those seem to employ similar but different tactics. It's really interesting.
Yeah, and putting them all together is what we call integrated marketing communication, so that all aspects of your communication strategy should be consistent and coherent
Mm-hmm.
and be consistent with what the brand is offering. So when you talk about billboards are still extremely popular, the latest ones, and if you go to Shanghai or Tokyo, you'll see these are 3D billboards where it
Mm.
looks like the Jeep is jumping out at you. And that's where they're using technology in those billboards now. But there's also, when you watch a for a World Cup is big right now, when you watch a soccer game, because soccer doesn't have commercial breaks in it, it's ongoing, unlike football where there's these natural breaks. All the advertising is in stadium.
Hmm.
And you see around the soccer field all these ads, and which are essentially billboards, but sometimes they're not actual print, but they're digital.
Hmm.
You'll see it in the scoreboard. You'll see it everywhere because wherever people are, when people are looking at the field, and if the field is surrounded by billboards, and the same thing is true for hockey,
I just
then
watched the UFC White House fight last night, and all over those mats were commercials for coffee and energy drinks and gambling. I can't.
yeah.
The gambling industry is out of control with the amount of marketing reach it has.
Yeah. Yeah, well, because sports betting is so big right now
Hmm.
that that's why they're doing it.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And I guess, and then and I guess just to round out the psychology section, the questions I have, I guess, is the difference in demographics. And I've read this also a bunch, especially pertaining to entertainment industry. You have the 18 to 30 group, and you have the above 40s, and how nuanced are these companies? I know, for example, again, to use my own anecdotal experience, I advertise on Google Ads. I specifically take out certain keywords. I call them, I think they're called negative keywords, where I say, I don't want someone to call me, ask me how to use the ultrasound machine. I want to know, I only want to show up for doctors who live in X, Y, and Z place, who aren't going to, who aren't, and I figure that if someone's 18 years old, they're probably not looking to purchase an ultrasound machine. So I want someone that's between the ages of 30 and 55 years old, and I don't want my advertisers to go anywhere near anyone else. How do companies go about breaking down their strategies according to different demographics?
Demographics are extremely important, and they're important because different things matter to different demographics. Think about products that are targeted at men versus women. There's some things that men don't care about that women might, and vice versa.
Hmm.
So you have to know the gender of your target market, age-wise. What is the target market for Starbucks, for instance? It used to be very trendy, but now it's a lot of older people
Hmm.
who see in the Starbucks, and so those change over time too. Facebook has a similar problem. Its audience is aging,
Yes.
so the younger people go to TikTok.
Hmm.
And so obviously companies have to know the demographics because the needs of those audiences are quite different, and what appeals to them will be different. So what appeals to seniors is different from what appeals to even 40-year-olds, let alone the 18-year-olds.
Sure.
And so I think you ought to be able to tell by looking at an ad what demographics they're targeted at. Unless they're these really mass market like Coca-Cola, which are targeted at multiple demographics.
Sure.
Nike has a message that resonates with a lot of different audiences or age groups.
Hmm.
And they do men and women also. I mean, they'll feature women in some ads, they'll feature men in some ads, and they'll have some with both of them. But given that the shoes and clothes they're design are different for women than men, they can have that targeted advertising.
And I guess you would say that that would be because they're selling an idea more than a product. They're selling a brand, this Nike brand of winners and effort and put in the hard work relative to, hey, we're gonna limit ourselves to the working class like Dunkin' or the white collar crew like Starbucks.
All right, and Just Do It
Right.
is one of the most famous or effective campaigns by any brand, and it works because it resonates with their audience.
Hmm.
So basically, and it's an old campaign, but it's still really strong. Why? It's saying that we're not a sports company necessarily. We're we're going to help you self-actualize. We're going to help you get better at
Yeah.
whatever it is you want to do. And everybody wants that.
Yeah.
People may not want sports, but they do want to self-actualize.
Yeah, certainly, certainly. And I think like your earlier case with Starbucks is also very apt because I remember reading a couple of years ago and it blew my mind that the cost on average of Starbucks and Dunkin' Donuts coffee are the same, but majority of people assumed that Dunkin' Donuts was cheaper based on the clientele that would or the places that they would set up. So I think Starbucks would you tend to find them in an airport lounge, and Dunkin' you might find outside of a subway. And so that and apparently there's an enormous amount of effort put into, like you mentioned with the four P's, but one of your placement. And hey, where is my product and what's my product associated with? And even though they literally they cost the same amount of money, it doesn't make a difference.
Yeah, because, and this is the pricing part of marketing, you want to price your product not based necessarily, I mean, the floor is how much it costs you. It has
Uh-huh.
to be at least that. But beyond that, it's what value does it provide to consumers?
Yeah.
And what image does it portray? And so if you want a premium image, even if the cost isn't that high, you're going to price everything high.
Do you think that it would resonate more with customers to have one set price all the time, or if a company showed flexibility with pricing for products, even if it's the same product across time? Is it do consumers prefer the stability of knowing, hey, I know my coffee is going to be $4 every time, or hey, I'm walking into a Dunkin' in Miami Beach, that's going to be $7. I'm walking into a Dunkin' in Wisconsin, Appleton, Wisconsin, that's going to be $1.50. Does that make a
Yeah,
difference to
that's
customers?
part of the, the behavioral economists look at that and they say we're willing to pay more for a cold drink on the beach than we are in a supermarket.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because A, our need is higher,
Mm-hmm.
and B, the substitutes are lower. So we do make those adjustments on pricing in terms of our expectations. I think people prefer a standard price because then there's consistency, they have expectations, but they know that Coca Cola in a bar costs more than Coca Cola in the supermarket.
Right.
What they're paying for is the service and sitting in the bar and so forth. So we do take that into account. I
Yeah.
think what is, I would say, a little dangerous right now is that companies are doing personalized pricing. That is, for exactly the same product, they'll charge you a different price from me.
Mm-hmm.
Now, price discrimination has always been the case. Airlines do this all the time. Look at World Cup pricing. It's all about dynamic pricing, which what does that mean? That means that they will price a ticket based on supply and demand at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And usually for World Cup demand is high, so that's how they will price it. They'll price high. But if I go online and I purchase something from Target.com, I might get a different price than you if you were to go and
Really?
yes. In fact, once I and a few friends were at a restaurant in another city, and we both called Ubers at the same time, and we were both going to the same hotel,
Mm.
and we got charged different prices.
Right.
And why? Because based on our own history of what Uber had gotten, what we were willing to pay, Uber charged us different prices because the route was exactly the same.
That's it. Can you make the case perhaps that, and this happened to me one time. I was going to buy tickets from Florida back to New York to visit my family. My wife had gone online. We went on the app, on the website, started to book the flights, and then we paused. And then we called to make sure it's the right. We got all the right dates and the right information. We went back a minute later. The price of the tickets went up $75,
Wow.
and it happened twice more,
Yeah.
right? And then I went to my own computer. I went to a different computer and I logged on and it was a cheaper price. And my question would be, is United or whoever the airline is, American, United, Delta, doesn't matter, are they raising the price because they're seeing customer activity and so they know there's more demand? Or is it more subjective, more personal? I know that Ephraim Hirschman makes X, Y, and Z amount of money a year, and I know that this other person down the block makes X, Y, and Z more or less, and so I'm gonna dynamically. Is that what does dynamic pricing mean? Is it the first or the second
So
case?
Dynamic pricing means a lot of different things, but basically it means charging different prices at different time periods, or and some of it is pretty clear. Uber is going to charge you more during rush hour than during,
Right.
and that we are all perfectly fine with because yeah, it takes them longer, etc. Dynamic pricing is also if I have, let's see, 100 tickets available and I have 70 customers, I'll charge a certain price. If I have 20 customers, I'll charge a lower price.
Right.
Why? Because I want to sell those tickets.
Hmm.
And one thing airlines do, which is very counterintuitive, they sometimes charge higher prices to their frequent flyers.
Really?
And the reason is because they know I'm a United frequent flyer. They know that I want those points.
Hmm.
And so I'll stay with United. And so
Wow.
a higher price. And they charge businesses higher prices than, non-business customers. And so there's a lot of different kinds of price discrimination that goes on, a lot of which makes sense, but it's all about what you think your customer is willing to pay. And online pricing, buying things online allows you to do that
Hmm.
because you're
Hmm.
not advertising a single price, it's
Sure.
personalized to different.
Right, right. It's customized. It's
So
it's
if
individualized.
I want to, for instance, fly somewhere, I first go to Google Flights that doesn't have my frequent flyer information, and I look up the price there. And if I go from there to the United, if I went separately on United, typically they charge me more money
Mm,
directly on the
crazy.
United website because they know I'm a frequent flyer.
That's very interesting. I try to tell customers sometimes that we do price matching. So I'll say, "Hey, here's here's the cost," and then they'll say, "Thank you," and then sometimes they'll tell me, "No," before they hang up. I don't want to waste your time. I'm just letting you know that I'm shopping around. And I'll say, "Well, we do price matching sometimes. If you show me the quote, then we can try and price match it." And I find that the response is often mixed. Some people find that off-putting because they say, "What does that mean? Is there not just a price for the product that I'm paying?" And then some people are excited about that and use it as an invitation to try to get a little bit more of a discount and to try to do a little bit more work, but to save themselves a little bit more money. So is there a way to identify, or is there different industries perhaps that people are more willing or tolerant for flexible pricing as opposed to not?
Yeah, I think it's basically price matching occurs in industries in which there is a lot of competition
Hmm.
and and the competition may be discounting its price frequently. So for
Right.
instance, Best Buy does price matching because of the nature of their business and because they don't want to lose the
Total
customer.
Wine does too, I believe. Total Wine, if you show them any listing of another product that's cheaper, I think they'll match it.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So in other industries where prices, people don't care as much about price as they do about other features, you won't get those kinds of matches because that's not what consumers are buying on.
Hmm. I see. Okay, that makes sense. I want to, well, right, I didn't realize where we are in time. I want to get to some morality, if possible. And I think this is going to be a really interesting turn because there's two aspects of morality. There's the morality of the advertisers, and I guess my first question would be, where's the line between predatory behavior and good marketing? Because that feels like a real slippery slope in a lot of different
A
ways.
real slippery slope. And in fact, a lot of people who are not in marketing feel like, it's all manipulation.
Hmm.
And that's one view. Marketers try to say, no, we're trying to give customers what they want. And so that's a different point of view. I think where morality really comes in is you talked about gambling before. If you are constantly targeting people who have gambling problems and get them to gamble more, you're creating more trouble. And the gambling industry wants you to gamble more.
Hmm.
And so they have their own incentives, they have their own nudges built in to get you to do that. For their high rollers and all, they have a different floor, they give you free hotel, meal vouchers, and so forth. So those are minor expenses compared to sitting there and throwing money at
Cracks or poker, whatever.
exactly. So, to me, it's different people have different views on what's moral about this or not moral.
Yeah.
Is it? And these are the types of ethical debates we have in classes sometimes, where one side says, well, you're selling a product just like any other product or service, and you've got to market it as such. And others are saying, no, you have this moral obligation not to get people to engage in bad behavior.
Hmm.
Bad meaning that could be self-destructive. So there are different views about that out there.
Yeah, and I would imagine that one of the, for example, and I heard this argument made recently, and it kind of blew my mind. I bought my house a year and a half ago, and I cannot tell you the amount of headache and trouble that I had to go through to buy this house. And I had to confirm my salary, and I had to confirm my teaching job, and I had to confirm that I had X, Y, and Z money sitting in the bank for X, Y, and Z amount of time. And then you have the, but then you could go into a gambling, you go into a Kalshi or Poly Market or anything like that, and you could throw down $250,000, and there's absolutely no background check, and there's absolutely
Mhm.
no kind of, I guess the word would be bar to entry, or I guess to purchase a home, the bar to entry is very high, not only financially, but also the amount of work that it takes to actually get the action done, to go
Right.
from step one to step two. And I think what made Amazon so incredible was they had created this, that they minimized the amount of steps it takes to go from product to purchase, right?
Right.
And so I think one or two steps or something crazy like that instead of the initial 14. And they noticed that you lose people along the way. So I
Exactly.
would even say that if it's an industry that you're dealing with, I mean, aside from the fact that it's an addicting habit, and totally put that aside, if you're dealing with large sums of money and there's already a layout to incentivize financially responsible behavior, it should apply across the board, I imagine, particularly for dangerous behavior.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it should. Does it always do it? No. There's the ideal, and then there's the real. And there will always be scammers out there,
Sure,
right?
sure.
And, particularly with deep fakes now in the world where they can clone your voice and
Hmm.
call your parent and say, "Oh, I'm in Mexico and I'm in trouble. Please send me money." This is a common scam that's out there, and the point is we can't tell because that sounds exactly like the person we know who we care about and all of that. So there's also that type of morality or lack thereof
Hmm.
that technology is making it easier to do. But yeah, there are a lot of ethical issues in terms of, should you say the product isn't, you know, we're running out of the product when actually you've got a full inventory in the back.
Yeah.
All of those I think sometimes are personal choices that
Right.
people make.
Right. And then you have the morality, and I want to, maybe we could spend the rest of the time we have with this is the morality that the company tries to show off to the public.
Mhm.
So, I emailed you about perhaps one of the most interesting case studies about this stuff is with Bud Light, where they went with Dylan Mulvaney, and then ultimately, after a big consumer backlash, transitioned to Shane Gillis and did a total 180 pivot on their messaging, on their branding, on their marketing what was it, within a year and a half, and that was only because they couldn't find. It seems like they couldn't find a way to get out that to stop the slide otherwise. So it when companies try to use marketing to show off their cultural values or cultural morals, the potential impacts that it could have.
Yeah, and that's what brand activism over the last 15 years has been about. And brand activism is basically when a company takes a stand on a controversial social political issue, such as LGBTQ rights or gun control, or, there are lots of controversial
International politics. I know Ben and Jerry's gets a lot of
issues. Yeah,
depend love or lashback depending depending what you think.
exactly. And the reason that companies were doing that is that all the research was showing that consumers really want they want to buy from companies whose values match their own.
Mm-hmm.
And that really got companies into this business of advocating for certain causes.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we're not talking about corporate social responsibility like ending child hunger.
Right.
Everybody agrees with that. Companies have been doing that for a long time. That's not where the backlash is. The backlash is if I'm in favor of gun rights and a company comes out and says, "Oh, no, we need to ban assault weapons," then there will be a backlash from me to that company. Whereas for somebody who's in favor of gun control, they might end up buying more from that company.
Sure.
So that's there, because of our divided society, there's so many issues that are in fact divisive
Right.
that this has become a problem for companies who do brand activism. So I don't know if you've noticed this, but lately companies are staying quiet on
Yes.
everything
Yes.
because they found that it was financially risky for them to take any kind of stand. The exception is companies that whose values are clearly part of their portfolio.
Mm-hmm.
Patagonia is associated with very liberal, sustainable
Mm-hmm.
type of
Earth
viewpoint.
conscious. Right.
If they take nobody is surprised if they say we favor policies on climate change. Chick-fil-A has a very strong conservative image because of their owner, and he puts his money where his mouth is. They don't open on Sundays.
Yeah.
And so those are extremes. But for most companies, it's dangerous to take these kinds of stands because, especially if you have a mass market audience of both conservatives and liberals, one side is going to be happy, but the other side, and it's always the unhappy side that's stronger. Boycotting
Sure.
is much more prevalent than what we call boycotting, which is people who support you buy more from you.
Right. I like to be a boycotter. I like to be that. I like to fall into that category.
Right.
But it's actually interesting, and I would love to maybe even, if you're interested, point you in the direction. I did some interviews with a couple of political researchers, Moritz Fiorina and Jim Thurber in particular. Where Jim Thurber's in your neck of the woods. He's by Washington area.
Hmm.
And Washington D.C. rather, and one of the things that I talked about with both of them was political polarization and radicalization.
Hmm.
And a very, very interesting message that they both presented was that the political sentiment as it is articulated is very frequently only indicative or representative of a tiny percentage on either end of the spectrum. However, it's a majority of of the political party's message. So, for example, people perceive, for example, let's say if you're on the right, you would perceive far more people on the left to be part of the LGBTQ community, far more than the actual number actually
Hmm.
exists. Right, your perception of them is that they're much more extreme, and
Yeah.
vice versa. And I think the left's views on the right is that they tend to be old and wealthy. And so where I could see the marketing issue develop is that if you're looking at what these political messages are, but you're not actually getting to the heart of what the majority of the people really value, then you're essentially advertising to the wrong audience. You're getting the wrong marketing data. So there's 30% of people that are in between political parties, and then within the political parties, 80% of them are not on the extreme. And if you're going to be running a marketing campaign on the 20% issue that people are 80-20 against, then you got a problem. And I think that's
Yeah.
we've been seeing a lot of that.
But I'll give you the other side of that. I
Sure.
agree with you that there are the extremes and they're very vocal extremes.
Hmm.
Those are the extremes you hear on cable news every night,
Or
right?
on social media, you see a lot of it.
Exactly. You hear them on social media as well. And the problem is that those are the voters that are most likely to go out in the primaries and vote.
Yes.
And so these political candidates have to play to that audience, at least in the primaries. The general election then becomes different because then you're trying to get those people in the middle. Now, for marketers, how do you, political campaigns aside, if there is, and often, for instance, when there's a mass shooting, people care about guns a lot.
Hmm.
And at that time, if you go and say that, well, you make a statement that is, well, we need more gun control, you can appeal to that audience because at that time it's not just the extremes, but maybe the center is also aligned with you. So it's also picking when you do stuff.
Hmm.
I think going back to Bud Light and Dylan Mulvaney, the reason that became such a that went so viral, it was really a conservative activist who pointed this out and made a big deal about it. And that's how it spread.
Right.
I think your average person wouldn't have known or cared.
Right.
They made it out to be a huge campaign when it was actually Bud Light was sending out personalized cans to different influencers, and Dylan Mulvaney was one of them.
Hmm.
And then all of a sudden it was, and Bud Light, one of the reasons there was such a backlash is that's not who their typical audience is.
Sure.
They have a conservative, blue collar audience that is not in sync with LGBTQ or anything like that. And so they made a huge mistake, though they didn't realize it at the time. But what got it really to that viral, massive level was the activists who
Pointed
then
it out. We rah rah about it.
and made it appear much stronger than it actually was as a statement.
And what's funny to me in particular about this whole episode is that the way that I think, my perception is that the way that Shane Gillis became the new ambassador was through that whole thing. He kept on popping up on, let's say, Joe Rogan's podcast with 100 million listeners and saying, I don't care what their message is. I like the beer. I drink beer because I like beer. And then at the end of the day, he single-handedly almost seemed to serve as a counterweight to that perspective. And in fact, I think one of his arguments was we're not cancel. We don't do cancel culture. Like if there's a message you don't like, you just don't
Yeah.
like it. But like I'm not gonna stop drinking beer because they said something I don't like. I love beer, so I thought that was
And I think that resonated with a lot of people.
I think so too.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think that's how he became the new ambassador.
Yeah.
My last question for you, if you can answer this in 2 minutes. If not, then hopefully you're enjoyed enough to be able to come back sometime in the future. But how we know that there's an enormous amount of resources being thrown at marketing for our eyeballs, to capture our eyeballs. What are some easy steps that we can take to combat that? Because it's really a fight for our attention. And what can we do briefly, simple steps that we could take to really avoid this trap? Because the billions and trillions of dollars getting thrown into marketing, psychologists, and consumer behavior and prediction. And so how does an individual like myself fight a company like Meta or Google or something like that?
I think even though it's difficult, you have to set your privacy settings on different websites. In Europe, it's so easy. It's so easy to opt out of marketing cookies. Here, they make you read all kinds of stuff before, 16 pages before you figure out how to do it. But if you really care about this, I would say start opting out of marketing cookies online because then you're not giving them your data and they're not selling that data to other companies.
Okay. That's a perfect answer. I love it. That's exactly perfect. Dr. Kirmani, I really appreciate your time. This is really so much fun. And again, I do hope that sometime, a couple of months or down the line that we can do this again. This is really so much fun.
Okay, great. Thank you. Enjoyed being here.
Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day. We'll talk soon. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.